Here's the shift, the tiniest little evidence that you're going to find. So, just to start familiarizing you with this, the sites that you see on the left-hand side, this is looking towards the south. Many of you may be familiar with this location. Of course, this is the Temple Mount. This is the Mount of Olives. This is the various quarters of the old city. We're looking south here towards Beit Lechem, towards Hebron. We're going to be talking about this area here, which is, of course, the city of David. And this little patch, just where the pointer is the particular subject of interest tonight. This being Sil 1. And of course, on this side over here, we're looking north. We're looking towards the modern city of Beit El and Shechem towards the north. Of course, this is the Kotel, Temple Mount, city of David down here. And again, we're going to be focusing on this area tonight. Now, what you see on the screen is Mount Moriah. It's Mount Moriah as it may have been 4,500 or 5,000 years ago. Nothing was on the mountain, and it was unpopulated for most of this time. It's a single rock. The rock extends from the Temple Mount area at the top of the mountain all the way down to the Shiloach and of course the Gihon spring on the bottom eastern side of the mountain. Now, this single rock, you can see the topography of the rock over here. Temple Mount here at the top. It's one rock all the way. Now, if you consider that in the time of Melchizedek, Noach, Melchizedek, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, in these periods of time, this mountain was pretty much unpopulated entirely. There are some archaeological findings from this period of time. Most of them exist around the Gihon spring, and a few of them exist on the lower eastern slopes of Mount Moriah. Those findings indicate that people populated around the water. The Gihon spring is the only water source for the ancient city of Jerusalem and for people living on or around Mount Moriah. Over some time, during the Middle Bronze Age and into the Early Bronze Age, there's a period of time where around the period of about 1800s before the Common Era to about 1500 before the Common Era, where there's almost no archaeological evidence at all. There seems to be nobody living on the mountain, very unpopulated during that period of time. We're talking about 3,800, 3,900 years ago. Later, during the time of Joshua and the time of King David, the mountain became more populated. You can see an image here. A village was established. People began to live on the top of the plateau of the mountain. The mountain falls off quite significantly on the eastern slopes and all around the mountain on the western slopes. And on the north there is a defensive trench that was recently discovered and talked about, which cut the head of the mountain from the lower part of the mountain and provided a defense, a natural defense for anybody living on top of the mountain. What really developed is this extension here from around on the eastern slope of the mountain, and this is kind of where we're going to be focusing on tonight. But that seems to be a facility that actually enabled the carriage of water. Of course, in order for anybody to populate the top of the mountain, one had to move water up the mountain every single day for people who were living, animals, washing, taking care of things up at the top of the mountain. And in order to service a maximum of about 1,000 people living on the top of the mountain, the king or the ruler of this mountain had to control the water supply and enable water carriers to carry water up and down the mountain up the mountain all day long to service people on the top. That's how the ruler retained control of Mount Moriah, and that's how ultimately we talk about Melech Yavus in Tanach. That's how the king of the Jebusites kept control of the mountain by controlling the water supply, the industrialization of water, and enabling people on the top of the mountain to live a life whilst being advantaged by the natural defense of the mountain. You can see here how the mountain developed over time. You can see this is the ancient city, which is relatively similar to this area. And then it continued all the way through to the Ottoman period, where we go to Jerusalem. People who are familiar with Jerusalem go to Jerusalem, see Jerusalem, and the walls of Jerusalem that exist there today are about 500 or 600 years old. They go back to the Ottoman period. Now, there's quite a lot to cover on this slide. What I'm going to do is to take you through. I'm doing this to familiarize you with some of the details. It's important before we launch into a video. And then we'll go into a recap of the video, and then immediately after that I'm going to take you through the most important detail that will establish some very important facts. I'm not going to give you my particular opinions here. We can do that in Q&A, but I'm really going to be presenting facts and leave it up to you to make decisions. This is the area that we previously looked at. You can see this is the area of interest. This is, of course, the Kotel up here, the Temple Mount, Mount of Olives, and this here is the city of David. Here we're going to be talking about Abram. Abram came from Haran, from the north. He came in this direction. And he comes to Beit El. He makes an altar in Shechem in the north, and he makes an altar in Beit El. He stops. He sets up the tent of Sarah. Beit El was to his west, and Ai was to his east. Now, it's known that the city of Ai has never been found. There are various opinions about where the city of Ai is. Many opinions try to associate Ai with Beit El in the north of Jerusalem, about 10 kilometers to the north of Jerusalem, which is where the modern city of Beit El is today. But at about the same time that this excavation that we're going to principally be talking about almost all night tonight, okay, was located. This excavation was also located about 2010. So both of these were located in the same year. They began excavations in 2010. This is about a 20 dunam site, about 5 or 6 acres. And it's really in the same time as the city of Ai, and could well have been the city of Ai. These two images that you see here, this is from 1930. You'll notice that this prominent building on the top of the mountain, surrounded by trees. This is a similar image from 1901. Of course, we're looking to the south in both of these images. This is the same building, prominent building at the top of the mountain without the trees from 1901. So at least 100, 120 years ago, this prominent building existed at the top of these mountains here. Now, this is the prominent building in this Google map, surrounded by trees. That is a church owned by an Italian fraternity going back hundreds of years, we don't know how long. And they called that church Ohel Abraham, the tent of Abram. Now, it so happens that church happens to fit exactly east of Beit El and west of Ai. It would be a perfect location for the tent that Abram pitched on his way when he came through from Shechem all the way to Jerusalem, ultimately to Beersheba, and then out to Mitzrayim, to Egypt, before he came back on the same way at a later point. Now, we're jumping forward here to the time that Abram had the battle between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. The story of the 318 soldiers that went up and defeated the armies that were against, who had kidnapped his nephew Lot. After that, he comes back to the same place and he tithes. He gives 10% of all the wealth that he accumulated to Melchizedek, to the head, to the priest of Shalem. Shalem Shalem was where Melchizedek was the Cohen, the priest in the city, and the combination of a word that comes from Avram and Shem and Melchizedek is Yirah from Avram, Shalem from Melchizedek. The combination is Yerushalem. Yerushalayim comes from this combination. Now we're going to jump forward to Joshua, the time that we came back from Egypt after the long exile in Egypt, 250 years, 210 plus the 40 years in the desert, 250 years. And we're going to talk about the first city that Joshua attacks after Jericho is the city of Ai. The first attempt to defeat the king of Ai was unsuccessful. We lost 36 people in that attempt. And Joshua fell on his knees and he sought tshuva, and he came back as the leader of the army. He built an ambush party. He stood here on the top of the Mount of Olives across the valley to the city of Ai. He led his army down this valley and into the desert. The king of Ai saw that they were afraid, running into the desert, and he chased after them. The ambush party, which would have been sitting somewhere around the bottom of this mountain here, came up around to Ai. Here you can see the path here, and attacked the city, burnt the city down. When the king of Ai, who was chasing Joshua and his men in the desert, saw that his city was being burnt down, he turned around and came back, and of course he was defeated by Joshua and the ambush party. Now, a very important map here. This is a map that Ronnie Reich, who's the lead archaeologist on the City of David site for 15 years or so or more, came up with in a book that he recently published together with Eli Shukron, who's the lead archaeologist on this particular site that we're going to be talking about tonight. The map is important because he, Ronnie Reich, says that the Gihon was never the name of the spring on the eastern slopes of the city of David. He says Gihon is a description of how the spring works. It's a pump, it's a gushing spring, but it was never the name of the spring. He says that the name of the spring was Ein Shemesh, the sun, the spring of the sun spring. And by mapping the borders of Joshua, he said the boundary between Benjamin and Yehuda extended from the foot of the hill by the valley of Ben Hinnom in Gate of Hinnom at the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. So it's coming down from here to this point here. Then it ran along the valley of Hinnom on the southern flank of the Jebusites. This is this section here. To Ein Rogel, which is this spring at the bottom of the city of David, and then curved northwards, and it made its way up north, and then to Ein Shemesh, and then it continued on into the area of the Arava, the ascent of Adumim, and the Arava of the desert. It's a very important map because it sets the boundaries between Benjamin and Judah, and we'll come back to that in the next slides. This man here is a man by the name of Chagi ben Artzi. Chagi is an archaeologist, he's a professor, he's a guide, he's been involved, he lives in Beit El in the north, 13 kilometers to the north. And he has been promoting for the last 40 years of his life to all of his people that he's been guiding that Beit El is actually here in the north of Jerusalem, and it's not in the south of Jerusalem. So he is a man that I met with on my last trip, and I took him. I've been waiting for this meeting for a long time. Finally, I got to meet Chagi and to take him on a tour of Ir David, to take him on a tour of what you're about to see tonight. He was completely shocked. He'd never seen it before. He's been spending the summer reading about it and learning about it, and we have a lot more to debate about the subject as to where is Beit El. But you can see the dueling Beit Els, the potential for dueling Beit Els here on the northern side of the tribe of Benjamin, and here on the southern side of the tribe of Benjamin's land. This is the land of Benjamin. This is the northern shoulder of Benjamin. This is the southern shoulder of Benjamin. And what's important is that these two Beit Els are potentially highly competitive because the one is adjacent to the tribe of Judah and the other is adjacent to the tribe of Ephraim. Now, the competition for the site of the temple would have brought much economic wealth and economic power and economic and other privileges to these tribes, and there was a struggle always for the location of where the temple would be located. Would it be on the northern shoulder of Benjamin, or would it be on the southern shoulder of Benjamin? Of course, it ended up with King David on the southern shoulder of Benjamin. But one generation after Solomon, Solomon's son Rehoboam, was confronted by the ex-treasurer of the temple, Yerovam, and Yerovam split the entire nation. At this point, he built a second temple up here in Beit El. He turned it into a temple of idol worship, and he split Israel into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and we have never been united as a tribal nation ever since that period of time. So it was a major, major setback for us, and it established Beit El here in the north, and really the Beit El of Tanach, of Yaakov, of Avram, was pretty much forgotten. We're going to jump into a video here. The video will last about 8 minutes. I'm going to slow it down a little bit because for the benefit of people who need to read the subtitles, it's in Hebrew, and it'll be about 8 minutes, and then I'm going to recap on that video.
מדי שנה, אך תגלית מרתקת שנחשפה לאחרונה עשויה לשנות את כל מה שחשבנו שידענו על אחד המקומות הקדושים ביותר בתנ"ך. כל הסיפור מתחיל עם חשיפתו של מקדש אבן עתיק ויוצא דופן במורדות המזרחיים של עיר דוד. האם אנחנו באמת יודעים היכן נמצאת בית אל? אם נביט במפה, נמצא את בית אל המודרנית מצפון לירושלים, ליד הכפר הערבי ביתין. באמצע המאה ה-19 קישר הארכיאולוג הנודע אדוארד רובינסון בין הכפר ובין בית אל התנ"כית. רובינסון גילה את המיקום באמצעות כתבים מהמאה הרביעית לספירה, לפיהם בית אל ממוקמת 12 מילים רומיים מצפון לירושלים, וכמובן לפי הדמיון בשם. אבל מקריאה פשוטה של הפסוקים בתנ"ך זה לא בדיוק מסתדר. יעקב בורח לחרן מפני עשיו אחיו והוא עוצר לישון וחולם חלום. בחלומו מופיע סולם מוצב ארצה וראשו מגיע השמיימה ומלאכי אלוקים עולים ויורדים בו. כאשר יעקב מתעורר הוא מקים מצבה וקורא ברית עם אלוקים. הוא קורא למקום בית אל, כלומר בית האלוקים. לאחר עשרות שנים חוזר יעקב לבית אל, ושם מקבל באופן רשמי את השם ישראל. רבים מפרשני התנ"ך שמנסים להסביר את המסלול שעשה יעקב ואת השיפוע של הסולם, מגיעים אף הם למסקנה כי בית אל המזוהה עם יעקב אינה מצפון לירושלים, אלא בתוך ירושלים, על הר המוריה. ייתכן שהיו כמה ערים שנקראו בית אל, אבל היכן נמצאת בית אל של יעקב? האם צפון לירושלים או כאן, על הר המוריה? ממצאים יוצאי דופן שהתגלו בעיר דוד על מורדות הצלע המזרחית של הר המוריה עשויים להיות המפתח לפתרון התעלומה, ואולי אפילו לפתרון תעלומה גדולה עוד יותר. בשטח C של החפירות בעיר של מקדש אבן, ובו 4 חדרים בעלי מאפיינים ייחודיים לפולחן. הממצאים כוללים בית בד קטן להפקת שמן, זית טהור, מכתש לדגנים, מצבה מורמת מעט עם תעלה לנוזלים, במקום לשחיטה ולהכנה של קורבנות ותעלת המים. מאפיינים אלו שונים מהותית משל מקדשים פגניים שאנו מכירים שפונים לכיוון השמש. מקום פולחן מונותאיסטי בעל מאפיינים דומים למקומות כאלה שמוזכרים בתנ"ך הוא דבר יוצא דופן. מה שהופך את הגילוי לחריג עוד יותר הוא התיארוך של שכבת הסלע ותעלת המים. זרעי חיטה וחומר אורגני שהשתמרו תחת שכבה של אפר קצת מעל שכבת הסלע ובתעלת המים עברו תיארוך פחמן 14 ותוארכו לתקופת הברונזה התיכונה בין השנים 1605 ל-1510 לפני הספירה. במילים אחרות, המצבה הזו והמזבח אינן מתקופת הברזל, תקופתו של דוד המלך, אפילו לא מתקופת יהושע. הפעם האחרונה שעשו שימוש במצבה הזו היה בתקופת יעקב אבינו. אז של מי הייתה המצבה? עיון בפסוקים בספר בראשית שמתייחסים לעיר שלם, היא ירושלים, יוכל לתת לנו תובנות נוספות. ומלכי צדק מלך שלם הוציא לחם ויין והוא כהן לאל עליון ויברכהו ויאמר ברוך אברהם לאל עליון קונה שמיים וארץ וברוך אל עליון אשר מיגן צריך בידיך ויתן לו מעשר מכל. מודלים מתקדמים שנבנו על בסיס התיארוך מראים לנו גרף פעילות שמתאים לכתוב במקרא. קל להגיע למסקנה שמלכי צדק ישתמש במקדש האבן ולאחריו האבות, כולל יעקב, שהקים בו מצבה וקרא לה בית אל. קל להבין מדוע היה המקום הזה חשוב ומרכזי עבור האבות, וכמובן מדוע החליט דוד המלך לכבוש אותו. אך הדבר רק מעלה שאלות נוספות. באופן תמוה ביותר, החפירות הארכיאולוגיות אינן מעידות על פעילות במקדש האבן לאחר מכן, לרבות בתקופת דוד המלך, אשר ניסה לפענח ביחד עם הנביאים היכן צריך לבנות את בית המקדש הראשון. לבסוף הנביא גד מורה לו לבנות מזבח בראש הר המוריה, ושם לבנות בית המקדש הראשון והשני, שהופכים להיות המקום הקדוש ביותר לעם היהודי. כיצד ומתי עבד הקומפלקס הזה של מקדש האבן, ולא פחות תמוה, כיצד כנגד כל הסיכויים השתמרה מצבת אבן קטנה ושברירית במשך 3,500 שנה? כדי לענות על השאלה הזו, עלינו להבין את המבנה הטופוגרפי הייחודי של ההר ומורדותיו. הביטוי קיר המלך המודרני והעצום הזה, קיר זה נמצא במטרה לבלום את כמויות האפר האדירות מליפול ולהיסחף ולכסות את אתר החפירות. הביטו גם אל חומות ההגנה העתיקות שנבנו כ1000 שנים לאחר המקדש והמצבה. במילים אחרות, לא צריך יותר מכמה שנים של הזנחה כדי שמקום כזה יתכסה לחלוטין ויובד. כאשר חזרו בני ישראל ממצרים לארץ ישראל לאחר כ-250 שנות גלות, הזיכרון של מקדש האבן ושל בית אל עבד. מקדש האבן בשלב הזה כבר היה מכוסה במפולת גבוהה יותר מאשר אדם שעומד על כתפי חברו. כל עוד המקדש והמצבה היו קבורים עמוק באדמה, המיקום של בית אל והמצבה הפכו להיות נחלת הדמיון. היה זה הערפל סביב המיקום של בית אל שאפשר למלך ירובעם, שמלך לאחר שלמה המלך, להכריז שבית אל נמצאת במקום אחר לחלוטין, מצפון לירושלים. שם בנה ירובעם מקדש עבודה זרה ופיצל את שבטי ישראל לממלכת שומרון הצפונית ולממלכת יהודה ושמעון. אבל אז, כ-200 שנים לאחר מכן, במאה השמינית לפני הספירה, קרה דבר שאף אחד לא ציפה. אנחנו מדברים עכשיו על השנים שבין מלכות עוזיהו ומלכות חזקיהו. יהודה וירושלים מאוימות באופן תדיר על ידי ממלכת ישראל, שקיבלה את חסותה של האימפריה האשורית. במהלך בניית חומת ההגנה על המורדות המזרחיים של עיר דוד, מגיעים הבונים לשכבת צלע, ושם נחשפים בפניהם מקדש האבן, המזבח והמצבה. תנסו לדמיין איזה גילוי מרעיש, איזה תזמון מאתגר. בפעם הראשונה מאז יעקב אבינו נמצאים בידי מלך יהודה לא רק הממצאים הפיזיים של יעקב, כלומר המזבח והמצבה, אלא גם המיקום של בית אל, של המקום שהוגדר בית אלוהים בשער השמיים. גילוי כזה יכול להיות מאוד נפיץ בזמן שכל כך הרבה נתון בו על כפות המאזניים. האם צריך להציג לעם במצב השברירי והמסוכן שבו הוא נמצא את הממצאים שנעלמו במשך זמן כה רב? אולי כעת זה דווקא זמן להתמקד ביציבות ובשמירה על חייהם של תושבי ירושלים ולשמור בסוד את דבר גילוי המקדש והמצבה לתקופה אחרת, ואולי אפילו לדור אחר שיוכל להתמודד איתו. מה אתם הייתם עושים לו הייתם בנעליים של מלך יהודה? כאשר הארכיאולוג אלי שוקון חשף את המצבה לראשונה בשנת 2010, הוא גילה שהמצבה עדינה כוסתה באדמה רכה בצורה זהירה מאוד, ובמטרה ברורה למנוע ממנה להינזק. המקדש ורצפת האבן כוסו באבנים ונקברו בחומות ההגנה הרחבות. אלמלא המאמץ הכביר שנעשה כדי לשמר את המצבה ואת מקדש האבן, אין סיכוי שהיינו מוצאים אותם היום בשלמותה. 2,700 שנה חלפו מאז, ולנו נותר רק להרהר בשאלה כבדת המשקל שעמדה בפני מלך יהודה, ואולי, רק אולי, יכול להיות שההחלטה שאותה הוא דחה באותם הימים היא המשימה שהוא השאיר לדור שלנו לפתור.
So, this here is the stone temple that was discovered. There are 6 rooms. You can see here that it sits here on the eastern ridge, just down, slightly down from the top of the slope. This is likely the place that is mentioned in Bereshit, when Yaakov comes, he's gone to Haran, and he's realized that he hasn't really stopped at Hamakom, at the place of his fathers. Comes back and he stumbles, Vayifka Bamakom, he stumbles on the place. Sun sets and he sits down, sets some stones around himself on that night. He has the famous dream of the Stairway to Heaven dream, the dream of Jacob. The stones unite in that night as a single stone, and he sets that stone up as a matzeva. This is a room here which has a raised platform. It's called a shittim, a shtia. It's a place for an altar, for building an altar. You can see a liquids channel for blood and wine and water, any elements that are added to the sacrifice. This is the room where the matzeva is located. This is a room of an animal pen. This is an oil press. You can see that oil press over here, used to make pure oil for use with sacrifices. This is the room where animals were slaughtered and processed to be made ready for offering on the altar. These pink lines that you see here are the lines that mark the wall, the eastern defensive wall that was built, almost a 2 meter wide wall, 2 and a bit meter wide wall. Here is the remnant of the wall, and you can see this wall ran all the way through these rooms, except in this area here where the matzeva is located. That was filled with soft earth. This is all, of course, stone boulders. You can see the remnant. This guy here, Philip, who's the present lead archaeologist, is about 6'4" tall guy. This wall would have stood at least 3 meters high at the time. It's a very significant undertaking. What you see here, importantly, of course, this was the retaining wall. It took us 6 or 7 years to build just this wall. Every time we went in 30 centimeters, we had to stop with the drilling, check it out, make sure that there was no archaeology being destroyed. It took us 6 or 7 years to build a retainer wall, but it basically holds back the entire mountain. The important part about this slide here is that immediately behind the matzeva, these are the various rooms. This is the room with the altar, this is the room with the matzeva. You can see this is a water reservoir and a water channel that directed water into room 1 and directed water into room 5. Now that water would have been used to clean the rooms of the animal excrements and blood that would have remained following the offering of the sacrifices. But there is no other water system in the area, and this water system is going to be very critical to what I'm about to tell you. This is the room. Some of these animal restraints you see here from images of the second temple rendered, where the animals would be restrained in order to sacrifice them and make offerings. This is a very low tether. You can see how low this guy standing next to it is, because the animals that were offered were generally had to be more than 8 days old, and were generally about 1 year old, because every animal offered as a sacrifice could not be blemished in any way, no blemishes on it at all. It had to be the best of your stock, and therefore young animals were offered most often as sacrifices. Here is the matzeva. There are many discussions about the matzeva, but these are some quotes from Bereshit. And this stone which I've set up for a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you shall give me, I will surely give you a tenth. The tenth. What this was is Jacob's statement before he goes out to Haran, before he had a wife and kids, when he was running away from his brother. He leaves Israel for 20 years, and he comes back later, 21 years later, back to this 22 years later, back to this place. When he comes back to this place, God said to him, "You whose name is Jacob, you shall be called Jacob no more, but Israel shall be your name." Now this is, Jacob had already received his name from the angel of Asaph, through the fight that he had with the angel before he came into Eretz Israel. But this is really where he gets his name from God, and this is the time that he assumes his name Jacob, and he does it back at the matzeva that he set up 22 years prior. There are some midrashim, many sources that relate to this being the foundation stone, this being Beit El, the house of God. Now, this is very important information here. what we're going to look at is, this is a drawing that Rashi puts together of the Mizbeach. He draws the west, the north, and the southern end of the Mizbeach, the eastern end of the Mizbeach, and the southern end. And he shows that the southeastern corner of the Mizbeach had no base. It had no base, and you can see how this drawing resembles this shittim, this foundation stone for the Mizbeach, in this room. This being the northwest corner over here, this being the northeast corner over here, and this being the southeast corner with no base on this side over here. So we can see how this resembles very much the drawing that Rashi has put together. Another very important part is the Gemara, what Zvachim says, the Gemara, on that what was the reason that there was no base on the southeastern corner. And we find that that Yehuda assumed some part of the land of Binyamin on the southeast corner of the altar. Now, this would be exactly as per this map that Ronnie Reich drew. This coming from Ein Rogel, down the bottom over here, leading up to the southeast corner, assuming the southeast corner, and continuing on to Ein Shemesh at this point over here. Now, that would mean that if this is all correct, that this altar would precisely agree with this map that has been drawn using Ein Shemesh and Ein Rogel as the boundary conditions that are spoken about in Sefer Yeshua at the time of Joshua. Of course, we go back, we see this morning sunshine here shining on the western wall. We see how an altar would have been built on this platform. And we also see that Abram, in the guide for the perplexed, which is the Rambam, he talks about how Abram turned his back to the sun, where all the other nations would face the sun, because the sun was part of their sun god, sun worship. So the priests would always face the sun; they would never turn their backs to the sun. But Abram specifically turned his back to the sun. The Jewish people believe that the Shekhinah is in the west. It settles in the west. It comes from the east and settles in the west. It's exactly opposite to what the other nations believe. And so this being the western wall of this altar platform, altar room, is where the Shekhinah would have settled, and this is where the altar was located. One other thing, I'll just go back. There's a mention in the Cheskel of the ramp facing east for the future Beis Hamikdash, the third temple, that the ramp leading up to the altar will face, the face of the ramp will be to the east. Okay, we're coming now to the conclusion and the very, very vital information that relates to the archaeology and establishes some critical timing for this. So I'm just going to summary what you've seen, what we found here in the water channel, which runs from the reservoir all the way down into these two rooms, as you can see it here. And in this here, room 5, and into room 1 over here. At this point, B, we found two items of organic material. The items were separated by a plaster, a man-made plaster that established a water channel above some soft earth. And the water would run in the channel into these different rooms. It would flush from the reservoir system, flush down rapidly by gravity through the channels and into the rooms in order to forcefully move across each of the rooms and allow both of those rooms to be cleaned. Now we took a sample from, we worked with Cambridge and with Wiseman and Cambridge using carbon dating, and we looked at both of these samples, one below the channel that had been constructed, so it was sitting there from before the channel was constructed, and one sample above the channel so it was sitting there from some time after the channel was constructed. This is a very important part of a term is post-Querman, anti-Querman, which is part of the known elements of archaeology. And we find the dating of these channels, the late sample at the bottom, 1615 to 1545, and the early sample, the one at the top, 1535 to 1445. So we know that the use of the channel dated between 1535 and 1445. So the water system is about 3,600 years old. Okay, so I'm going to now break it down so that you understand the timeline and you understand exactly how those samples fit into the biblical timeline. Jacob went to Haran in 2185 since creation, 1576 before the Common Era. Okay. Jacob left Haran 20 years later, 2205 since creation, 1556 before the Common Era. Benjamin was born in 2208, 1553 before the Common Era. So we see these three dates are quite close, 20 years apart here and only a few years apart here in this section. The samples below the channel, below this section here, you can see this plaster in the channel. The samples below X and from this area were dated in this range, 1545, 1615. And the samples above, of course, because the samples were above, they could have come from either a period of time when the channel was first used, or as the channel accumulated dirt, as it went out of use, these samples could have come from that date, but they're pretty close to the surface of the channel. And we can see that 1535 to 1445 was the last time that channel was ever used. Now, we can see that Jacob left with his family for Egypt in 1523 before the Common Era, and the Jews never came back to the site for another 550 years. The 250 years they were in Egypt, 210 plus 40 years in the desert, and the 300 years until King David came back to the site. It's about 550 years. This site was completely abandoned. This eastern side of the mountain was completely abandoned, and the whole site was buried over entirely, and it was not discovered again until Uzziah, King Melech Uzziah came and built the eastern defensive wall, opened it up, found it, buried it again, and then we never found it again until 2010 when we excavated there and discovered this facility. So we can see these samples are very, very critical samples. They were excavated and discovered by Weissman, and we've been working on this for many years. But critically, it's almost impossible that these samples would date this water channel and therefore date the use of this facility, the last use of this facility, in the perfect time of Jacob's existence at Beit El. And so we must conclude that this hashgacha, this confluence of dating from the biblical dating and the archaeological dating are coming to tell us something that is very important to know about the location on the eastern slope of Mount Moriah. And of course we see that Jacob took some of these stones, he set this matzeva up, according to Chizkuni, from some of the Midrashim, the stones had been part of the altar of Akedah, of Isaac. That's where these stones came from the ramp of the altar of Isaac. And according to Rashi, during these nights, the night these stones fused. Now, if this is the site of Akedah, it has very, very significant ramifications in halacha. notwithstanding the fact that the first and the second temples were built on Mount Moriah, at the top of Mount Moriah, it doesn't necessarily stand to reason that the third temple would be built on the top of Mount Moriah, as long as the temple is on Mount Moriah. Rambam says that very clearly, and the temple locations can be on Mount Moriah. A Navi will come along and tell us where the Mizbeach will be. The Mizbeach, the altar, defines the location of the temple. Once you locate the altar, you can then start to measure out exactly how the rest of the temple will be constructed. So it's very important that we find Akedah. Clearly, King David, when he decided to establish an altar on the top of the mountain, when he bought the land of Melech Yehus, there is no relationship, at least in Tanach, to the actions of King David, even notwithstanding the fact that God, the prophet God, told him to do it. There are many, many questions about whether it was a personal altar, whether it became a national altar. There are lots of open questions about the location of the altar for the first and the second temple, notwithstanding the fact that both temples were destroyed. And please God, wherever we find the altar for the third temple, that temple will be the permanent temple, never to be destroyed. And Bezrat Hashem, with the coming of Mashiach very soon, we should see that in our times. Thank you very much, and I hope it's informative, and I'm happy to take some questions.
So, Kevin, what's the bottom line?
No, I mean, a Navi has to come along, but the point is that the bottom line is that that everybody has to come to a conclusive view about where this is, what this is, where it is, how important it is to us, why is it here now. It's very important that all of Am Yisrael come to that conclusion. Progressively, the archaeologists that I've been working with have been very conservative, very, very conservative. And slowly they've been coming around to understanding the halachas, understanding all of the similarities between this location and Jewish law. And also the fact that it faces the west rather than it faces the west, which is highly unusual in Israel. Only Arad is another location where there's a temple that faces the same, and it's a Jewish temple. All other temples that have been located are Avodah Zarah, and they face the east. So the archaeologists that I've been working with are slowly coming to the conclusion that this is a place of Kadosh, as opposed to Avodah Zarah, and therefore their views and their identity with it is changing as well. So yeah.
This is the first time I'm hearing your presentation, so it's only cursory. Is it correct that because you're predicating that Yaakov would be on Bethel, built the Mizbeach, that would be the place of the Mizbeach?
Built the Matzeva.
Built the Matzeva, that would be the place of the Mizbeach.
Only because of the location on Hamakom, on Mount Moriah, on Har Moriah, okay, and only because of the association with some of the Mefarshim and some of the Midrashim and some of the commentary, Chazal, Gemara, relationships between Beit El, Hamakom, Akedah.
But if you go through the wording of the Maimonides, Rambam, he says the Mizbeach, and he mentions the Akedah, and he goes where he does not mention Beit El.
No, he doesn't mention Beit El. He doesn't mention Beit El, but he's very clear about Har Moriah. He's very clear that it's on Mount Moriah. There's no question about Rambam on that. And he says it's in a specific location. That location can never change. It's Akedah. It's never not Akedah. But the question is, and he then in the same sentence connects that statement with the statement that this is the altar of Israel, which comes from David HaMelech in Chronicles.
So if you're looking for the Mizbeach, just on the final question, if you're looking for the Mizbeach and you don't know where the Mizbeach is, perhaps look for the Kodesh HaKodashim.
Well, I mean, the Kodesh HaKodashim we know the Kodesh HaKodashim was up on the top of the mountain.
And we know
there's no argument that the first and the second temple were on Har Bayit.
Right.
Okay, there's no argument about that. Nobody would argue about that. There are some views that it wasn't and everything else, but it was up on Har Bayit. And where the Kodesh HaKodashim was, where the Aron HaKodesh was, we don't know because it was hidden, as we know, from Melech Yoshiyahu, and we don't exactly know where it is. It was actually even Shlomo Melech prepared a place for it, which is, in some opinions, buried already at that time. So we don't really know where the Aron HaKodesh is.
Thank you.
Just to get bearings where this archaeological dig is, where you've got the Ir David, the current visitor centre,
Yes.
and you've got the Tur Shilach or whatever,
Yes.
is this across the road?
No, it's on the same side of the mountain, but further down the mountain and just on the eastern slope, or on that slope that goes down to the valley.
Is that open for visitors?
This is not open for visitors.
Will they open it?
But yes, we're in the process of opening. Yes.
Akiva.
Yeah, 1 second.
So actually, with the mosque is today on Har Bayit, it's not the holiest place for us.
This is not for me to say, but the point is that if this is the location of Beit HaMikdash Shlishi, then the Muslims on the mosque will be bound to our Kodesh HaKodashim.
Akiva, if indeed this was a holy altar of Shem and of course of Yaakov Avinu, so it may obviously retain some sanctity. Have any rabbinic authorities come and said to the effect that perhaps we should be careful about traversing?
I've taken quite a few rabbis through there. I haven't taken through any specific groups on an authoritative basis. I think the archaeology is still underway. It's difficult to turn it into a place of Kadosh today. I think if it is a place of Kadosh, we can sanctify it again, and we can bring it back to a state of purity again. And it's all stone, it's all Evan, it's all the mountain. It's potentially capable of becoming completely tolerant. Yep.
Is there actually a record of you saying we uncovered it after a long time and then put the salt and earth to cover over? Is there a record in people was?
We know it was at the time of King Uzziah. Okay, so
What was the date?
2700 years ago.
Okay.
So we know King Uzziah uncovered it, and he basically had to either decide to destroy it or preserve it. But he built a wall right through that.
And was it named? Was it called Beit El?
We don't know.
Okay. So how do we know that it's that name?
Well, you've got to go back to some period before. Why did King David come to this mountain? There's lots of mountains.
Yeah.
It could have been any mountain that King David came to. King David was a king in Hebron for 7 years. Okay, he didn't need to come to this mountain. Something compelled him to come to this mountain. He knew something was there. He had a connection with it. Our forefathers had a connection. He came to our forefathers. He came to the place of our heritage, of our indigenous root. More than anybody else, he knew. But he didn't need to come to this mountain. He could have chosen any mountain. Or why did he even leave Hebron? He came to Yerushalayim. He came to this mountain, Mount Moriah. He took over the city. It was pretty straightforward to take over the city. He just got control of the water. He didn't have to even kill anybody. He didn't even have to kick the king out. He lived with the king of Yavuz all of his life after that, until the end. But this mountain was the only place that he could unify the nation. It was the boundary between Yehuda and Benjamin. and ultimately the place that he would build, that his son would build the Beit HaMikdash.
Moshav Betel, Yishuv Betel, nothing to do with
No, nothing to do with it, only to do with Yerovam. The Moshav Beit El is to do with Yerovam. Yerovam confused the whole nation. He messed it up for everybody. For thousands of years he messed it up. We're still confused about it to this very day. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because one of the things I believe I have to, one of my shlichus, the things I have to do is to reverse that confusion. For me, it's an important thing to do, to re-establish the place that Yaakov Avinu came. This is the Beit El of Yaakov Avinu. It's not Yerovam. Yerovam had nothing. Yerovam's intent was to confuse. That's what he did. He did a good job of it, by the way.
These 4 or 5 rooms that you, well, the rooms that you showed us, they're all the way at the bottom, and then the Kodesh Kodashim is at the top. So is that all part of the Beis HaMikdash?
No, nothing to do. It's completely distinct. Completely distinct.
It's just a separate.
It's completely distinct. This is 1,000 years before the Beit HaMikdash.
Okay.
Okay. Before the Beit HaMikdash of Shlomo met. This is 1,000 years before that.
I went there.
Yeah.
Rabbi, thank you very much for a great chat. In the introduction, the Rabbi said he felt that you were personally felt the Leia Mashiach was on you. Why was that? Why do you feel that?
That the responsibility? Also you.
I agree. Not for everyone? Or?
Everybody. Not my fault that Mashiach's not here.
Kevin.
Good. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it.
Very big thank you. I think in today's day and age, it's very important to make these, to understand these findings, because the majority of the world somehow still believes that the land of Eretz Yisrael doesn't belong to us, and these things are very compelling. Beis El, Yaakov Avinu, and we have the sources, and now we have the actual, the proof to prove that Jewish people who didn't arrive in 1948.
Yeah, we did. 1948.
Thank you.